I am extremely concerned that our country has to be sued to take care of its most vulnerable.
And now they've weaponized HUD, are starting to say you won't get funding if your community doesn't actively enforce these laws, which is the Cicero playbook.
You know what? I thought Ben Carson was bad, and now...
At the hearing, the Department of Justice attorney who showed up waived argument, wouldn't even contest. They are just trying to sneak things through and hope that they don't get challenged because everybody's too busy. They passed a plan for a 1,300 person Megatent camp 7 miles outside of downtown in the middle of nowhere, no public transportation, no voluntary entry or exit. They say some of these units are going to be work conditioned housing, which to me means forced labor. It still feels hyperbolic to say Trump is planning to put people into internment camps, even though he ran literally on that platform and said it outright. That's exactly what he means.
When do people wake up?
We need to behave as if there are going to be internment camps for people who just can't pay the rent, because if we don't stand up and fight it, there will be.
I know this sounds like James Bond villain shit, but it's real. They're not calling them camps, they're calling them solutions. Across the country, state leaders are pushing plans to round up homeless people into massive tent cities, some with locked doors, guards, and even forced labor. In this episode, Eric Tars from the National Homelessness Law Center joins me to break down how we got here. From billionaires funding anti-homeless laws, to HUD being weaponized, to federal policy that punishes people for simply being poor. I know it sounds extreme, but it's already happening. So was it a year ago that we did this?
Was it before or after Grants Pass? I forget.
It was after Grants Pass.
It was after Grants Pass. It was probably about this time last year. Yeah.
So it's been a year. What's changed?
I mean, it's been an acceleration of everything we already knew was there. Yeah, obviously, criminalization has been happening since the dawn of time, but it used to be this sort of organically popping up thing. One mayor would hear from one constituent that they didn't like one tent on one corner and respond to that with an ordinance. That changed 5 years ago with the Cicero Institute coming along and billionaires spending billions of dollars to send lobbyists out and actually push criminalization. Then you got to the Grants Pass case, which kind of took the brakes off from the legal side of things and said, you don't even have to have another place where people can go before you can arrest them, ticket them, fine them. And we told the court at the time that was going to be seen as a green light by communities and by a future administration, and that's exactly what we've seen. We've seen 300 plus communities pass laws.
300 now.
Yeah, since the Grants Pass decision, 320 at least new ordinances introduced, and then this past summer we saw the president taking that green light and truly running with it, making it national policy to arrest people experiencing homelessness, to involuntarily commit as many as possible, and then immediately implementing that, taking over DC with federal troops, federal law enforcement, and go after to, quote, get rid of the homeless under bridges.
They've weaponized HUD.
And now they've weaponized HUD and are starting to use the funding streams to say, you won't get funding if your community doesn't actively enforce these laws, which is the Cicero playbook. So they've taken what they were doing at the state level and now moved it up to federal policy.
You can see Cicero's influence in what the Trump administration is doing.
Yes.
Quite clearly.
Yes. The fact that, they included the piece about compliance with the sex offender registry. We know that Cicero put out their report on the supposed sex offender threat within homelessness. And so, it's all coming from them up through their contacts. We know that Joe Lonsdale is close with J.D. Vance and,
Oh, yeah, well, the whole defense and everything else.
Yeah.
The Cicero Institute playbook, you see it very obviously with the sex offender, which is such a challenging conversation. Rightly so. I mean, people that commit sex acts with children are some of the worst people in the world. I remember, and it's on Invisible People, interviewing, I think it's level 4, is that there's certain levels. This is the worst of the worst. And he's homeless. So he has to report to the sheriff's department every day. They know he's homeless, and being homeless actually increases the chance that he might offend again, but they don't do anything, right? Because there is no housing, and there's definitely no sex offender housing.
Right, because, many shelters have to, if they are mixed gender or whatever, or have kids, they have to ban under the law. And then many communities say you can't live within, a mile, a half mile of any school, daycare, etc., and that basically zones out the entire city. There's, this famous story of the folks in Miami Beach who there's literally nowhere in Miami or Miami Beach where they could live, and so the one place that they could be was under the bridge in the middle, in between the mainland and the island, and that's literally the only place they could legally exist. Yeah. And so, there's nowhere for them to be housed, and yet now we're seeing this threat that people wouldn't even be released from prison if they don't have a housing plan. And if you can't get housing anywhere, then presumably that means indefinite detention, even after your sentence.
So they've done their time.
Yeah.
According to society, whatever it was that they did, a jury of their peers decided, okay, this is the amount of time they're going to be incarcerated. Then they're exited, more often than not, to homelessness. I'm laughing because I didn't plan on going into this topic, but since we're here, after somebody does their time according to our laws, that there's a solution where they can live, and homelessness is not that solution.
Right, and you hear the word sex offender and it brings up these images of the worst of the worst, but what's actually happening, there's a woman who wrote me a letter, Amber Jackminski, who was homeless on the streets of, I think, Fort Lauderdale, and she had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. And all the public bathrooms had been closed deliberately by the city so that homeless people couldn't access them. And so she had tried not drinking a lot before bedtime to prevent having to go to the bathroom, but she got a UTI. Yeah. And so on this night, she had to go to the bathroom, went behind a bush, lifted up her dress, and peed. She was charged not only for public urination, but for public exposure, indecent exposure, which is a sex crime. And so now she's got that literally on her record for the rest of her life. So some of these people, again, it's very deliberate that Trump and Cicero are using this image of a sex offender as something to drum up fear in people. But often it's just people who had to go to the bathroom and didn't have anywhere to go.
That's where I was going with this. You took my segue away, is that with what's being done is they're using it to get the public scared to push their anti-housing first agenda, pro-criminalization agenda.
Exactly. And the wording of Trump's executive order has all this extremely dehumanizing language, the same language that he uses around undocumented folks to drum up fear, make people afraid, and then make it seem like it's okay to criminalize them, to put them into detention camps just the same way as he's putting undocumented folks into Alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah. Let's get away from that. I didn't mean to start off like that, but we did. And this is a authentic podcast. Homeless Unfiltered is the podcast. National Law Center. You guys probably have a bandwidth issue right now.
It's been, just we're feeling punch drunk right now. One thing after the next. Every time you feel like you're finally catching up, something new comes and hits you.
I mean, besides the sheer volume of the amount of criminalization that's happening, is there anything different?
One of the things that amazed me so there was this funding application that came out from HUD for continuums of care to apply for this small funding stream. But in it, in order to get it, they had to certify that their communities criminalize homelessness and squatting and substance use disorder, and that they would cooperate with ICE, all these things that aren't even in the control of the continuums of care, and that they will not deny that gender is a binary and all this stuff. And so we sued to stop it, got an injunction against it. But at the hearing, the Department of Justice attorney who showed up waived argument, wouldn't even contest the piece around the gender binary. Like, they are just trying to sneak things through and hope that they don't get challenged because everybody's too busy. It was insulting, frankly, that they put this in and they didn't even bother trying to, they hadn't prepared in advance a defense of something they knew was indefensible, and even on the spot, couldn't come up with a defense. They just said, yeah, this clearly violates the First Amendment rights of people to have to state that they believe that gender is a binary. And so, that's the sloppiness, the arrogance, whatever you want to call it. It's insulting, but it still made us and our organization and hundreds of other attorneys have to spend hours preparing this case and wasting our time when we could be actually solving homelessness.
The lack of integrity, I think, bothers me the most.
Yeah.
I understand people have different beliefs, right? And we now live in a world that's polarized, and we don't sit at a table and have those conversations. Hopefully someday this country will start healing, that we can have those conversations again somebody might hold a difference of opinion. They're not necessarily the enemy. But what's happening is there's just so much dishonesty and misinformation and lack of integrity that it's really scary.
Yeah, I mean, when Trump sent the troops into D.C.
As homelessness grows, people are getting frustrated and they're pushing for laws that criminalize homelessness, which will only make the problem worse. Invisible People reaches more people, educating them on homelessness than all other homeless sector nonprofits and campaigns combined. But we do it on a limited budget. We don't have the funding they do. We are mostly funded by individual donations. And now that the economy is struggling, individual donations are disappearing, and we need you. I get it. You might not have the money to donate. Many people are struggling right now. Please share our content, share our videos. It really matters. And if you do have some funds and want to help be part of the solution to solve homelessness, please visit invisiblepeople.tv/donate. Our important work stops without you. It's really scary.
Yeah, I mean, when Trump sent the troops into D.C., he said, well, of course, we'll give people the option to go to shelter. Did he provide funding for shelter? There's a reason that there are so many people unsheltered in D.C. It's because they don't have enough indoor places for people to go. And not only that, Congress is withholding D.C.'s funding right now, so they can't even provide all the shelter they should be providing. And he could find the funding to send millions of dollars a day to send troops there, house them in hotels, all these National Guard troops from out of state, which could easily house the entire homeless population of D.C. for a year.
Right.
But somehow he can't find funding to actually get those people into housing so that they don't need to be on the streets in the first place.
And sadly, it looks like that whole model is going to be duplicated across the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the scary thing is one of the lines in one of those executive orders that a lot of people miss is he wants to create a standing National Guard force at his discretion to send to anywhere he deems in need of crime suppression. But in this case, crime just means not having a home. And so it starts in DC. We see it now in Chicago and Portland, Memphis. But it could be anywhere next.
Yeah, I did a LinkedIn post today because I've been paying attention to the right wing or the right leaning influencers. And I was at an event in Los Angeles that was, news influencers focused mostly on doing social good. And people now get their information from folks online that they have a parasocial relationship with.
Right.
We don't have that on our side. But on the right wing, right leaning, and some of them are just doing it because they make money, right?
Right.
And there's almost a dozen of them right now in Portland. And they are doing things to get views, to get clicks. Like they are actually inciting some of the conflict. Like they're in a peaceful situation and then they go and do something to get everybody agitated so that they can say, look, Antifa, it's totally crazy. And that is growing. Where I was going is the whole media environment, which is click hungry, and then you have the social algorithms that make money off rage. It's hard to even catch your breath to fight any of this.
Yeah, I think the dangerous thing is that, this didn't start yesterday. People have been primed for decades to think of cities as dangerous places, homeless people as dangerous people. Yeah. And now it's just, all of that, conditioning is manifesting itself into these authoritarian approaches. And, if you go to Portland, 99.999% of the city is fine. They're filming like 2 block radius. The same thing in Chicago.
Same thing in LA. I live a half a mile from the federal building. So while Los Angeles was burning on fire, and yes, some Waymos were set on fire in that 1 block radius, I would walk outside and feel the sunshine, birds chirping, and I'm like, what you're seeing on social media is not necessarily reality, but they're leveraging it, right, to push their agenda.
Yeah, and the danger is that at the same time this is happening, they're also reducing funding for housing, going to potentially kick 170,000 people out of the permanent supportive housing that got the sort of most difficult to get off the streets people off the streets. Right. And now they're going to put them back out on the streets. And the second that you get out there, it's going to be either jail or detention camps, because jail is really expensive.
I was at an event. I was asked to speak about media. The mayor was there. She spoke about that with these new HUD regulations, that Los Angeles could lose $400 million in funding. That is so drastic and would be so devastating. And what they don't tell you, what Cicero, oh, they're nonprofits, they're making money. Los Angeles has housed more people than it ever has, but there's so many new people entering into homelessness. For every $100 increase in median rent, homelessness increases by 9%. I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but this whole narrative that, oh, nonprofits are just wasting money is bullshit. Yeah. There's problems in every sector. Enron, Bernie Madoff, whatever. You can look at waste, fraud, and abuse everywhere. Nonprofits are doing the very best they can, right? And if you take a city like Los Angeles, which I'm sure others, and there's been problems, and there will continue to be problems. There always will be. But if you look at, I think it's 27,000 people were housed last year.
Exactly.
That is an amazing number. And if you're complaining about they're spending the budgets to solve homelessness, it's just being wasted, that's a false narrative. And if you don't fix the housing crisis, if you do not fix the lack of affordable housing, that number is going to continue to go up.
Yeah, and it's going to get even worse because their end goal is not just jail. Jails are expensive, but they want to put up more of these alligator Alcatraz style megatent sprung structure type facilities. They've got the kind of pilot project for that in Utah, where the governor has said, we are going to completely support and implement Trump's executive order. And just last week, their homelessness board, which was created by some Cicero legislation to take out the people who actually know how to end homelessness from the oversight and just put in folks who don't know as much. They passed a plan for a 1,300 person Megatent camp 7 miles outside of downtown in the middle of nowhere, no public transportation. 300 beds are going to be involuntarily committed, locked facilities. Another set of beds are going to be no voluntary entry or exit. It's going to be where you get sent for jail diversion. And then the rest of the beds, even though theoretically you could come and go, they're going to be actively enforcing anti-camping, anti-loitering, all these other laws. So you're pretty much, if you step foot off the campus...
This is Utah.
This is Utah. And the thing that scares me the most is that they say some of these units are going to be work-conditioned housing, which to me means forced labor. And we've seen some of these other bills introduced at the state level that also have this kind of like forced labor element to them in Louisiana and West Virginia. And, you know, to my eyes, I see them kicking out all of the undocumented, low-paid labor from the country.
Got to make up for it somewhere.
Got to make up for it somewhere.
So what I was thinking as you were talking is like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I was actually scared to bring up that they're creating internment camps.
Yeah.
I was scared because it's so ridiculous. It's like James Bond villain shit, right? Yeah. It's so out there. And then it's now part of the conversation because it's actually happening. And Ian, in one of our podcasts, actually brought it up that said, you know, what they're probably doing is forecasting they're going to have a reduction in the labor force with undocumented immigrants being deported, and they've got to make up for it somehow. So bring back the labor camps. And it was like, holy shit.
Yeah, a lot of these laws, anti-loitering, anti-panhandling laws, are straight out of Jim Crow, because what that was we lost our unpaid labor force, and we need to make up crime so that if you don't have a job, then you are inherently a criminal. We'll pass you through the loophole of the 13th Amendment that says slavery is abolished except as punishment for a crime, and then we'll make everybody who, you know, we need to go back out into the fields a criminal.
So you at the National Law Center, meaning organization, you too, I mean, you guys are busy trying to counter a lot of the legislation. And then there's also, I'm really glad, I believe you're part of this too, where NAH is suing HUD.
Yep.
I want to reframe this. I am extremely concerned and actually sad that our country has to be sued to take care of its most vulnerable, right? Yeah. I am concerned and sad that HUD has been weaponized. Here, if you're talking about an organization with a lot of issues, HUD is one of them.
It's right? Far from perfect.
Oh my God.
We aren't defending the status quo.
You know what? I thought Ben Carson was bad. And now, you know, Ben Carson is not even nearly as bad as what's happening. And so what I'm saying is it's concerning and sad that it has come to when that we have to sue to get the administration to do the right thing.
Yeah, and like it's and right now, you know, we are just trying to block the most harm. We don't pretend that HUD was perfect. It definitely wasn't. We had plenty of issues. We might have sued them for other things under other administrations. But what they are doing is tearing things down without saying how they're going to make it better. Yeah. And definitely what they're going to do is not going to make anything better. It's only making it worse. It's only going to increase the number of people who are on the streets, and then that's going to create more of a premise for them to go in with their reactionary approaches.
It was really evident, the change, when HUD kind of separated itself from service providers. And what I mean is, like, when you would go to an NAH conference or you would go to some homeless event, there would be some representation of HUD there.
Right.
And the conversation would be about how can we work together to prevent and solve homelessness. That has disappeared completely, totally, completely. There are people at HUD that are some of the most, I can't even believe that they're the most dishonest people. They have no qualifications to be in a position of working to housing. They hate homeless people and want them criminalized, which is probably their only qualification now to work in the current administration form of HUD. And it's, so how do we fix it?
I mean, it's all of it is trying to make it so that people either don't see government as capable of solving the problem or is actively making the problem worse. And that's damage that's being done regardless of what we can stop in the courts is already that, they've damaged the very notion that government is a force for good, that we can do collective good by putting our tax dollars towards community problems and solving them in a way that isn't locking people up and, shipping them out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
But, I think right now the strategy is block and build. We're going to try and prevent as much harm as we can through the courts, through protest, through working with our elected officials to try and stop, use whatever power they do have to slow things down. But then what we have to be really honest about is the system as it was not up to the cause of solving homelessness. It was underfunded. It was never fully designed to succeed. And so what we need to do is also at the same time be reaching out across issue areas and forming those solutions that are going to not just get us back to the status quo, but actually create housing justice. So we're going to address all of the disparate impacts on different racial communities, different gender communities, different ability communities, and just the working poor, make it so that, they can afford a place to be in again. The rent is too damn high, and, until we fix that, we're going to have homelessness.
Yeah. One of the I like all of our podcasts. I'm a little biased. I had a conversation with Marcy Thompson from the National Alliance on Housing First Didn't Fail, We Did. And I thought it was a very authentic look of how we can, fix things if we're honest about it. Housing is still the only smart, practical, realistic, well, maybe it's not realistic because we don't have the support solution. And it just makes, you have this treatment first movement that's growing. And it's not really about people, it's not really that they care about people going into treatment, very similar to the sex offender. It's being used because they have done good research and understand what the public, the paradigms that people hold on to and what they can leverage. And people believe treatment, they can just go into treatment and it will solve the addiction crisis. And so this treatment first, and then they've played off the failures, and there have been failures in Housing First, mostly because it's been not supported.
Right. Set up to fail.
Yeah, it was set up to fail. And they're using all this to fight against the solutions that will actually work to put people in internment camps and forced work camps. And I'm like rubbing the table because of the anxiety here. When do people wake up? So I was at an event this week, a really, really big event. The former vice president spoke at it. A lot of celebrities, a lot of influential people, and they're all there for social good. And it was really interesting that every person I talked to, everybody was not aware of what's happening. They were not, I mean, they're aware of the immigration.
Yeah.
They're aware of what's being shared on MSNBC or Fox News, right? But they were not aware that 170,000 people that are in housing are about ready to lose their housing. They weren't aware about HUD being weaponized by Trump and the new funding criteria and how it will affect them.
Yeah.
Because yes, it's going to make homelessness worse. And these internment camps and everything, it's going to affect everybody. And when are we going to say enough is enough? I mean,
yeah, I mean, and that's part of the strategy is just to overwhelm people. There's
Yeah.
A new tragedy of the day, and if there isn't, then Trump will tweet something and distract people with that. And so yeah, people aren't aware, and it still feels hyperbolic to say Trump is planning to put people into internment camps, even though he ran literally on that platform and said it outright.
Right.
But there's so much
Yeah.
outrageous that he does, and he'll say, well, I don't mean it that way, but that's exactly what he means.
Yeah.
And what can we do? People really want to believe that it's all going to be okay. It might be, but the only way we'll make it okay is if we stand up and fight for it to be okay. We can't just stick our heads in the sand and hope that it'll all go away. And so we need to behave as if there are going to be internment camps for people who just can't pay the rent, because if we don't stand up and fight it, there will be.
Okay, good segue. Who's fighting and winning? Give us some examples of advocates or nonprofits that are having a positive impact.
Well, I think the best example of that is the fights that we've been having at the state level against the Cicero Institute bills. They have failed in more times than they've succeeded, and that's because really great local folks have come, the continuums of care, the service providers, but also faith leaders, law enforcement who doesn't want to be stuck holding the bill with all these things they're being assigned to do. Even in deep red states where Cicero would think that they would have an easy time, people are coming out and saying, this doesn't represent who we are. There's a great quote from one of the Iowa senators who voted against a bill there, or maybe it was Kansas, where he said, I grew up working at soup kitchens. That was what my faith taught me to do. And those weren't bad people. Those are just people who needed a hand up, and arresting them, putting them into camps, that's not going to help. We have seen success that where people do come out, where they, organize and contact their elected officials, that some of them, at least at the state level, are receptive to that. I really am afraid of what's happening at the national level, where even the folks who used to, on the right side of the aisle, who used to understand that housing first is fiscally conservative as well as socially progressive, they aren't willing to speak up anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that scares me.
Oh my gosh.
And I mean, I'll just say that it does still feel, it's hard to say that, there's plans for these work camps, detention camps, internment camps, whatever you want to call them, because that feels so extreme. And my grandfather was sent to the Gulag in the Soviet Union after World War II. I know what this means to be saying this, and I'm afraid of it happening here. It's not something that I say lightly. It's not something I'm trying to get clicks with.
Right.
It's because I'm really afraid that what happened to my grandfather is going to be subjected upon people here in the U.S. And it's homeless people today, but they are very clearly teeing up that this sex offender piece is also, once LGBTQ folks are deemed criminals.
Is that happening?
I mean, that's what they're teeing up. That's this case before the Supreme Court yesterday on conversion therapy, legalizing that, the transgender bills, like they're
going to what? Make conversion therapy legal? No.
legal again. Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No. No.
That's
No.
what it seemed like at the Supreme Court yesterday.
Ugh.
Or, abortion service providers or people who get abortions. Like, the people who they could name as criminals tomorrow are endless.
Well, one of the things that you'll notice, and Stephen Miller and Trump are now using, they're very good. Cicero is too. They're void of integrity, and they're evil, but they're very good at polling and research and understanding messaging. And you'll notice that Trump and Stephen Miller and others in the administration are now using insurrection when they're talking about Portland and Chicago and whatever cities they're going in, because they're gonna, use the Insurrection Act at some point, right?
Yep.
So I love that. Like today, I know Gavin Newsom was one of them, and I'm sure there was other, because there was Portland, there was the animal costume people dancing.
Yeah.
And then it was like, we found your insurrectionists, and you got the dinosaur dancing, and because that visually, you're full of shit. You're lying. That's the issue that I have with Cicero. That's the issue that I have with Trump, is that they are dishonest and void of integrity for their purpose and agenda of criminalization.
Yeah. And it makes it impossible to have a rational, logical conversation when people aren't working in a fact-based environment and are just working to amplify prejudice.
Well, I'm going to, I believe, and partly it's my own paradigm bias or whatever you want to call it, because, it shifts, it goes back and forth, and the pendulum will shift at some point. We have to get back to a society that treats people that are different than us as our neighbors, not as our enemy.
Yeah, and I think there is precedent for this before. Like, after World War I, we kind of had the roaring 20s where the rich got way richer, the poor got poorer, and there was a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment, a lot of anti-poor sentiment. Then the Great Depression hit, things got really, really bad, but we came out the other side of it with, FDR's New Deal and all of the very programs that actually made America great back in the 1950s and 60s, this age when Trump, supposedly wants to get back to, that he sees as the golden age of America, that was based on massive housing subsidies. Whether it was, the subsidies that built the suburbs, that, supported individuals in buying their homes, or the construction of public housing, later Section 8 housing in cities. Everything that made America great in that halcyon time, that was based on massive investment in housing. Yeah, my hope is that we can survive this and the pendulum will swing and we'll get back and we'll build something that's even better, that doesn't involve, redlining and all that. But we need to fight to get it there. We can't just hope that it comes, because, otherwise we'll get stuck on the wrong end of the pendulum.
The people of influence, your Joe Lonsdales, your Elon Musks, there's a whole bunch of them now with Larry Ellison, and, they're controlling media. And if you look at it, it can be really scary and depressing. And somehow it's got to change and start going the other way and balancing it out. It's how we've always been. It gets worse before it gets better, but then it gets better. So anything you'd like to share?
It's what I came here to say is we have to stand up, we have to reach out across sectors in ways that we haven't before. Those of us who have been working in this industry, we have to do our jobs differently. You've talked a lot about that. We can't just do what we've been doing. But yeah, when people stand up, when they get organized, they can win even against the odds.
Yeah. How do people support your work?
They can find us at homelesslaw.org or check out tons of other resources at housingnothandcuffs.org.
Thank you for spending time.
Thank you.